Hey, Kevin, I don't know about you, but there seems to be a topic of the moment everywhere I go, whether it was, recently working with about 1,500 kids out at Rahagas, teaching them how to shoot all day long, or speaking to a Republican women's group, or speaking to a civic group. I get the same questions. There's actually two, but I want to deal with the first one. What's the California Rifle Pistol Association's opinion on recalling the governor of California? Have you got that question?
Yeah, I've gotten it plenty. The speaking engagements that I'm doing as well, and just through general email communication with our membership base, which I mean, it deserves an answer. I think that the question is a little bit conflated, though. So we're getting these questions of what is CRPA doing about the recall, but there are two different things here. And I think both of them deserve to be broken down a little bit. Okay, so you do have the recall.
Yeah, let's break the recall down, Kevin. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are confused. Is it like, and one of the things I wanted to break down was you hear a lot of people. In fact, I saw a T-shirt that I wanted to tear off the person, and not for the reasons people would think. It said, "No on Newsom," and had the date of the recall. But if you vote no, because you saw the "No on Newsom" shirt, you actually voted keep Newsom in office.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think we need to break down what yes versus no on question one really means.
Right. And just to circle back really quick, the second question is we have an election that comes after that recall. So both
of question two.
Yeah, both of those things deserve to be broken down. And yeah, sometimes when you get to the ballot, it ends up being a little bit confusing, but I think it's important for people to understand how supportive CRPA has been of this recall from the beginning.
Which would be yes.
Yeah, totally yes.
Yes.
Yes on the recall. And,
because the governor bites.
Yeah, I mean, he came out very early in his campaign and basically told California that he wanted to end the gun-owning culture in California, and he was going to support any legislation that made it to his desk that had that same message.
But wait, I have a few questions because, unfortunately, a lot of people on the far political left have tried to frame anybody that supports the Second Amendment, owns a firearm, as being a hardcore Trump-supporting Republican. And yeah, there are people that own firearms that are that. There are also people that own firearms that are libertarians, independents, Green Party members, centrists, and Democrats. Because, wait, the Constitution of the United States doesn't belong to a political party or flavor. It belongs to all of us as Americans.
Right, and I think even with the COVID pandemic happening, we've seen a wider variety of people purchasing firearms in the first place.
But what I want to get back to is like that vote. So on Election Day for the recall, coming up here in September, is do I vote yes to remove him or no to keep him as my governor? And while the Second Amendment, we obviously, everything that was in Prop 63, from taking away your magazines to making the most draconian ammunition purchases in the entire country that have absolutely nothing to do with crime because, oh, wait, criminals don't go to Big Five to buy ammo and criminals don't go to Turner's to buy a firearm. They do that on the black market, which, as we've said on hundreds of videos, it seems like the APPS program, which goes after armed prohibited persons, is ineffectual because we know where they live and we don't do anything about it. So bringing it back to the recall, I think one of the things that we got to talk about is, Kevin, even if we were to take the Second Amendment off the table, I would vote for the recall because I would say the governor definitely mismanaged COVID.
Well, he mismanaged COVID. He's mismanaged our land programs throughout the state.
Really?
Which, by the way, still affects the firearms community, specifically the hunting community. He's
How about fire control?
Fire control. He's mismanaged water.
Wait, let's stay on fire for a moment because I want people to know this. Like, up in Sonoma, Napa, happens to have an agricultural product that I believe is in the top 3 or 4 things we export as Californians that drive our economy. It's called wine.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And it seems like a lot of wineries had to dump their wine because there was too much smoke in it. But there was a winery, I think called Plumpjack, that didn't have to do that. Wait, who owns Plumpjack?
Yeah, it's Gavin Newsom, and this is the classic tale of rules for thee but not for me. It would apply to the same thing when he got caught at the French Laundry in the restaurant with all
that's
those
a modest
with-
McDonald's type
with
restaurant.
all those
Kevin.
medical and big pharma advisors while everybody else was supposed to be locked down. I mean, there's just been egregious action after egregious action. And yeah, you're right. I mean, this doesn't necessarily even have to pertain to the firearms community. There are plenty
gas tax.
Yeah, there are
Did you know
plenty of
gas
reasons
in
to recall
the
him.
central part of the country where it doesn't generally come from? You can buy a gallon of premium gas for under $3, and right now, when I was coming up here, that's like almost $5. Just saying.
Yeah, and those those gas prices are unheard of, and it all kind of stems back to one area, and that is Sacramento, where our legislators and where our government officials reside. So, while we have all of these examples and reasons under our belt, like I said, bringing it back to CRPA, we've been trying to collect signatures for over 2 years to try and get this recall to happen. We've been in
he
it.
was ineffective at wiping that out, so the recall is on.
Finally. But the point is that we've been in the recall for as long as it has been around with Gavin Newsom, and we continue to do so. We even have chapters within our chapter programs that were holding events to get recall signatures.
Very instrumental.
Yeah, back last February when the book tour was going on, Recall Newsom. So this is something that we've been very engaged in, that we've been pushing our membership to get this information out to people within their communities and their networks, because our state as a whole can prosper a little bit more, we think, if this guy gets out.
Yeah, and I think one of the big messages that CRPA would be behind is you have multiple talking points when you're talking to your friends, your family, your coworkers, people in your neighborhood about the recall and getting that vote out there. And I think it's also important that you realize no matter which of the four corners or anywhere in between in this state, that every county responded with, let's recall the governor. And so that's question one. But there is that other question that follows it. So assuming, this is how it works, folks, assuming that everyone votes yes, so remember, forget the no on Newsom shirt, because that's part of the political opposition's thing to try to keep him in office, is you go, yeah, no on Newsom, and you mark no when you should have marked yes. So you mark yes to recall the governor. Now you come to question two. Being that we get over 50% of the vote to recall him, he's out. And now we have to find his replacement, of which, as of the filming of this, there's 60 plus people. Yeah. And we keep getting asked, who are you guys behind? What are you guys doing about it? So I think we need to break down kind of our process.
Well, and I think this is what the questions that we're getting is actually alluding to. So, I mean, our efforts in the recall have been out there for a while. I think people understand that we've been part of that recall effort. But when they're asking us, what are you guys doing with the recall? What they're really asking is, what candidates are on your list?
For me to consider.
Right, and how do you view them? And I think that that's important. And with, that many candidates out there, it's going to be tough.
It is, but it isn't. I mean, so let's break down CRPA's long-standing, like decades-old process. So a recall is a little different. So in a normal election, to make it really simplistic, Kevin, what we do is we look at any politician who has been in office and we look at their voting record. And we keep very good track of that. We have many people and many stats to show, like, did they show up to vote? Did they stand up for the Second Amendment? Did they make public statements about the Second Amendment and all the derivative rights and privileges that come with it? And we look at who funds them. So obviously if they're funded by, say, the Brady campaign, probably not going to get high marks from us. Like they won't. That was sarcasm. But then we also have a questionnaire that we send out that is very detailed. And then we verify that the candidate and not somebody in their campaign actually filled it out. And so that's why sometimes we have people like, oh, well, this person we think's really good. Why didn't they get a good grade? Well, they didn't. If they can't take the time out to fill out their own questionnaire and say where they stand on it, what do you think they're going to do once they're elected? They're not going to be there for you. Recalls are different, though. Recalls, anybody that wants to ante up the money can say they ran for governor, and some people do that because the rest of their life they can do public appearances and say, as a former California gubernatorial candidate, which in some cases I will say is a joke. And I could go after a couple of people easily within the 60 and point that out. Mm-hmm. But I think that the bigger question is, who are we looking at? And so there, are strong candidates who have been, for a couple of them for decades, have been out in front, making very positive Second Amendment support continually, have stood up to the beating that they have taken from the left. And then we have a lot of people that are saying, well, I could be that person. And so we have sent to anybody that's requested it, our survey, but we're also double checking that survey with what they've actually done.
Yeah, so I think it's important to create a distinction here, though. It's not that somebody gets a better grade because they're famous.
No.
Somebody gets a better grade because they've been in the spotlight longer and we have more of a history to judge them on. Mm-hmm. And that might be the difference between two people who return their questionnaire who have similar sentiments, saying that they're very pro Second Amendment, but if we have more evidence for one person than another, we might lean a very specific way geared towards the information that we have, which kind of brings me to the...
Well, I'd like to touch base on that because I think you're highlighting a really salient point in this discussion, and that is, how has CRPA come to this conclusion? Because we didn't do it overnight. We've been obviously involved in state politics for almost a century and a half. And Kevin, I can remember before I ever came to work for this organization about 20 years ago, there were some candidates in a couple of assembly races that had no political record. They were like fresh off the street, first office to run for. And they talked a great game. They got elected. They didn't follow through with what they said. And at that point, CRPA said, just because you talk a great game and you make a lot of promises and you get a bunch of people excited that you're going to do these things, we're not going to give you anything other than a grade based on what you said, but we're not going to endorse or support because there's no track record. And I'll give you a great example. We have a guy, Assemblyman Mathis, who not only has a great track record, but that guy, we don't even have to call him. He's out there constantly defending gun owners in California at a great political cost. And so, when Assemblyman Mathis turns in for the 22s, which I'm sure he will, his survey and questionnaire, we have this established record. I feel comfortable looking at anybody in the public and saying, if this is something that's critical for you to vote on, you can trust this guy's word in this area. But, the lady down the street from me, who's a nice woman and I've never had a problem with, decides to run for office and says, oh, I'm pro this, just because she's a neighbor and just because I know her, just because I like her, and just because she says it, I have no proof.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that difficult of a thing for people to understand anymore. Candidates for political positions saying things and then getting into office and not proving them, which kind of creates the conundrum, though, because there are some people who will prove themselves if they get into that office. We see those gleaming examples a couple of places, specifically in California in the last several years. But the fact remains, if there's no proof that we can go on, endorsements just really aren't possible.
Right.
A good grade is always a good grade, and we stand by those grades, but those grades are based primarily on what people say. We would rather put an endorsement based on what people do.
Right.
So, that's a line that we have to tote, and we try to tote it carefully. I think that, we've made good decisions in the past on those endorsements, and I definitely stand by them. But the gleaming question in the room, okay, we have a public figure who's been very outspoken for a while on the Second Amendment, who has just cleared up, what you probably want to call it, a little bit of foul play from.
Oh, you mean from the Attorney General and the Secretary of State? Yep.
Yeah. So we have
Not
this.
that they work for the governor that's actually being recalled. I'm sure there was no ties there at all.
So yeah, but we now have this this wonderful man, Larry Elder, who has seemingly thrown his hat in for the governor race. We do have the questionnaire out to him, and we're awaiting his response.
Which I'm sure is going to be really, really good. But let's talk about Larry for a moment.
Sure.
We have other candidates that are out there, like John Cox, who ran for governor before and lost to Newsom. We have, Faulkner out of San Diego, the former mayor, and other people. I tend to look at somebody like Larry Elder as this is a guy who has nothing really personally to gain. I mean, he makes more money as a talk show host than the office he's running for. So you can't say, oh, well, you know what, he's doing this because Kevin, he wants to make. No, he wouldn't be making more money. He'd be losing money. You also can't say, oh, he's doing this because he wants people to know him. He's nationally known.
Yeah.
He doesn't need that ego boost. This could arguably be a step down. This is truly a guy that's kind of like a founding father in the sense of he wants to do this because he wants to give back. A lot of the other candidates, I think this is a stepping stone race.
Sure. And I got to tell you, the firearms debate might not necessarily be front and center in Larry Elder's campaign. However, we have a ton of evidence from his radio show over the last 25 years
Right.
on his stance, and that's really what we have to go off of right now. And I think that
it's not just radio shows. I mean, like you said earlier, and I think it was very accurate. You and I do this all the time. We are held accountable by what we say in the public. And by no means are we a nationally ranked public speaker. I mean, we work for a state nonprofit. And you and I are scrutinized and held to what we say. Larry Elder has been saying this stuff in public appearances, and I think he's going to touch a heartbeat with a lot across political spectrums and ideologies because Larry Elder, is a Californian. He did not, by any stretch of the imagination, grow up with a silver spoon in his mouth like our governor.
Yeah, not even close.
Yeah, this guy's out of Crenshaw. I grew up in Gardena. That's not an easy place to grow up. And he is a man who understands what it's like to be with nothing in California and to build yourself up into somebody that has means in California. He knows everybody in California's story.
Yeah, and I think that's actually appealing to a lot of people in California. There are a lot of people suffering right now. You've got the home crisis that we're going through. You've got a lot of people who are pretty fed up with how everything is overpriced and overregulated in this state. And I think that he is going to end up speaking to a lot of those people. That's neither here nor there, though, in our topic. I don't necessarily want to say debate,
Right.
but what we
because we're really not debating each other on this one.
But what we judge on is their proclivity toward the Second Amendment community, and that is what we are going to continue and judge everybody on when we come out with our report card. And like I said, he's been talking about it. He has values that have aligned with this for a very long time. He has been outspoken on it in the past. So we're going to await that survey to come back to us, and we are going to act accordingly.